Welcome to your deep dive. Today we're tackling something different, not overflowing closets, but memory clutter. And you've given me, well, us, a really interesting mix of stuff to work with, including an episode of the Minimalists podcast that really gets you thinking.
Ooh, that sounds interesting.
Yeah, so get ready to explore how our memories and the things we hold on to can impact our lives in surprising ways.
You know, it's funny because we often think of clutter as just something physical, right? Like our stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
But this episode highlights how even intangible things like memories can start to weigh on us, like physical clutter.
Okay, let's unpack this. So in this minimalist episode, there's this guy, Jerry, and he's a stroke survivor.
Oh, wow.
And he's dealing with something that I bet, many of us can relate to on some level. Because of the stroke, he lost access to a lot of his memories. And now he's holding on to physical objects because they're like keys, They unlock those memories for him.
Yeah, I can see that. It's like those items become these little time capsules transporting him back to those moments. Yeah. And for him, these things aren't clutter. They're lifelines to a part of himself that he's afraid of losing.
The minimalists, Joshua and TK, they make a really interesting point about this.
Okay.
They say that memories actually live within us, not in the things themselves. And that triggers can be helpful, but they caution against becoming overly reliant on those triggers, especially when we start clinging to the past.
Yeah, I can see that. It's like becoming attached to the physical representation of a memory instead of the memory itself.
Right.
Almost like you're outsourcing your memories to these objects.
And this brings up a good point. Holding on to memories, even good ones, sometimes prevent us from fully experiencing like what's happening right now.
Oh, that's a really good question. Because I think sometimes we get so caught up in reliving the past, whether good or bad, that we miss out on the beauty of the present moment.
It's almost like trying to drive forward while constantly looking in the rearview mirror.
You're going to miss what's right in front of you. As you were saying that, it made me think about those times when you're at a concert or a special event and everyone's holding up their phone, trying to capture the whole thing on video.
Oh, yeah.
But are they really experiencing it?
Right.
Or are they just so focused on documenting it for later that they're missing the actual moment?
Yes, and the irony is that we often think taking all those pictures and videos will help us remember the experience better. But if we're not really present to begin with, will those recordings really bring back the same feelings? I'm not so sure.
I know what you mean. It's like sometimes the act of trying to capture a memory can actually make it harder to truly experience it.
Exactly.
And this ties into the idea of what they called reverse nostalgia, this almost obsessive need to document everything, as if we're afraid of forgetting.
It's almost like we're trying to prove to ourselves that we were there.
Right.
That we did the thing.
Exactly. And it's a fascinating concept because it really speaks to that tension between our desire to preserve memories and our ability to actually be present in the moment.
Okay, so what does all this mean for us? Like, how do we find that balance? How do we cherish our memories but not let them, weigh us down?
Right.
The minimalists, they suggest that maybe instead of clinging to objects, we should try capturing memories in ways that don't create, that physical clutter.
Okay, I like that. So what, like journaling or something?
Yeah, things like journaling or even making voice recordings.
That's interesting because it allows you to capture the essence of the memory without having to hold on to the physical object itself.
It's like creating a mental scrapbook instead of a physical one.
Exactly.
Right.
And, I think that's an approach that would be particularly helpful for someone like Jerry, who we were talking about earlier, the stroke survivor.
Yeah, absolutely.
If he had been journaling or recording voice notes before his stroke, he might have a more accessible record of those memories now.
And it's not just for people who've experienced a loss of memory. These methods can also be helpful for any of us. It's a way to revisit those past experiences without needing a whole attic full of stuff to trigger those memories.
Oh, totally. It's like decluttering your memories, so to speak.
Yes. And they bring up another good point. You know how clinging to memories can actually create thought clutter?
Oh, interesting.
Like almost like our minds become overstuffed with the past. Have you ever noticed how dwelling on certain memories can kind of pull you away from what you're doing in the present moment?
Oh, all the time. It's like our minds are constantly replaying these old tapes, both good and bad.
Right.
And it can be exhausting.
It's like those memories are competing for space in our minds, and the more we cling to them, the louder they get, It drowns out the peace and quiet of just being here now.
Oh, I totally get that.
It reminds me of that example they shared about a simple ticket stub. To Jerry, that ticket stub represented this treasured memory, of seeing his favorite musical. But to someone else, it's just a scrap of paper. Right, exactly.
So it just highlights the fact that the value we place on objects is, well, it's totally personal.
Yeah, it's subjective.
What might be clutter to one person could be a priceless treasure to another. And even for the same person, an object's significance can change over time.
Oh, absolutely. What was once really important to us might not hold the same meaning later on.
And this all gets even more complicated when we start thinking about the minimalists' own experiences.
Okay.
Joshua, for example, talks about how hard it was for him to let go of his mother's sentimental items after she passed away.
Oh, I can only imagine.
Yeah. He ultimately took photos of the most meaningful objects and then let go of the physical things. What do you think about that?
I think that's a really practical solution. You honor the memory, but you don't have the burden of physically holding on to the object itself. It's like acknowledging the sentiment without letting it, dictate your living space. Right. And what's interesting is that Joshua and TK, even though they call themselves minimalists, they admit that they sometimes fall into that trap of reverse nostalgia too.
Really?
Yeah, they even worry that by over-documenting their experiences, they're actually, hindering their ability to be present in the moment.
That is interesting. So it's like their desire to minimize their physical clutter might be leading to a different kind of clutter,
Yeah.
a clutter of digital memories.
It makes you wonder if maybe there's a deeper lesson here about finding balance, not just with our possessions, but also with how we choose to capture our experiences.
It's like maybe the real clutter isn't the stuff itself, but our attachment to it, whether it's physical or digital.
Right.
It's about our relationship with the past.
I like that. Our relationship with the past.
And how that relationship affects our ability to live fully in the present.
I think that's a perfect place to pause. Let's take a break and come back to this.
Sounds good. Welcome back to your deep dive into memory clutter.
It's amazing how much there is to unpack here. We've talked about letting go, those triggers, being present.
Right.
And I think as we go deeper, it's becoming clear that this isn't just about minimalism.
No, definitely not. It's more about understanding the role that memories play in our lives.
Right.
And how we can find a healthy way to manage them, a way that lets us appreciate the past, but doesn't let it, overshadow the present.
And one thing that really struck me from that Minimalists episode was their idea that even clinging to good memories can pull us out of the present moment.
Oh, yeah.
It's almost like, we're so busy replaying those highlight reels in our minds that we forget to appreciate what's happening right now.
Absolutely. It's like we're constantly looking back instead of focusing on what's ahead. And speaking of looking back, they also talked about reverse nostalgia.
Oh, yeah.
Which is, it's that obsession with documenting everything.
Yeah, like when you're at a concert and everyone's holding up their phones trying to record the whole show instead of just enjoying the music.
Exactly. It's like they're more focused on capturing it for later.
Yeah.
Than actually being present in the moment. And I think when they look back at those photos or videos later, they might not even evoke the same emotions because they weren't really there. They weren't fully present.
Right. It's like trying to capture lightning in a bottle. You might get a glimpse of it, but you can't really hold on to its essence.
Exactly. So is there a way to strike a balance? I mean, how do we capture those memories without, missing the moment itself?
Maybe it's about being more intentional with what we choose to document, really focusing on those moments that really resonate with us.
Right. Instead of trying to capture everything.
Instead of just automatically reaching for our phones, what if we took a mental snapshot?
I like that. Mental snapshot.
Yeah. Really trying to imprint that scene in our minds, almost like creating this internal photo album that we can access anytime, anywhere without needing a device.
It's about making memories more like an experience than a product.
And when we do take pictures or videos, maybe make a conscious effort to put the camera down and actually soak in the experience.
Right. Just be present.
Be present.
And, the minimalists also talked about how memory clutter can actually become thought clutter.
Oh, yeah.
Like how dwelling on past experiences, even positive ones, can lead to this constant stream of thoughts that can distract us from the present moment.
Yeah, all that mental clutter can make it so hard to focus, to relax, to just, be.
Exactly. It's like our minds are filled with clutter, just like our homes can be.
And all that mental chatter, it can be really exhausting.
It really can. It's almost like those memories. They're competing for space in our minds.
Yeah.
And the more we cling to them, the louder they become, drowning out the peace and quiet of the present moment.
It reminds me of when, wait, before you go on, I'm curious about what you mean by like thought clutter, Like, is it like having all these random thoughts popping into your head? Or is it more about dwelling on specific memories?
I think it can be both. Sometimes it's those random intrusive thoughts that just, hijack our attention.
Yeah.
But then sometimes it's more about, getting stuck in those loops, replaying past events, whether we're reliving happy moments or, agonizing over mistakes. And either way, it creates a kind of mental chaos that can prevent us from being fully present.
So it's not just the amount of thoughts, but also the types of thoughts and how we relate to them,
Right. Like, are we in control of those thoughts or are they controlling us?
And this is making me rethink my own relationship with my memories, It's a good reminder that we have a choice in how we engage with our past. We can choose to dwell on it or to acknowledge it, appreciate it, and then let it go.
Exactly. And in letting go, we create space for new experiences, new memories, and a deeper sense of presence.
It's like we're decluttering our minds to make room for new growth.
Exactly. And by doing that, we might find that the memories that we do choose to hold on to become even more precious.
So what resonates most with you as we're unpacking all these ideas?
Well, the power of mindfulness keeps coming up,
Yeah.
It seems like the key to managing memory clutter is becoming more aware of our thoughts and how they affect our ability to be present, to just be.
Right. It's like we're creating a space between us and our thoughts, allowing us to choose which memories we want to focus on and which ones to just let go of.
It's about becoming the curator of our own mental museum,
Yeah.
choosing which exhibits to highlight and which ones to keep in storage.
I also keep thinking about the minimalist suggestion to use alternative ways to capture memories, like journaling or voice recordings. It's like preserving those moments without needing more stuff, right?
Absolutely. And it's not just about capturing the memory, but also about how we revisit it later. Journaling, for example, can be a really powerful tool for reflection, for gaining insights from our past experiences.
I've always loved to journal. I haven't done it in a while, but maybe it's time to start again. It's a way to have a conversation with my past self.
I agree. And it doesn't have to be formal. It can be just jotting down thoughts and feelings or even recording a voice memo on your phone when you're walking. Just find a method that works for you.
You're right. And that actually leads perfectly into what we were talking about earlier, about digital memory clutter.
Oh, yeah.
We've talked about physical clutter and mental clutter, but what about all those digital photos, videos, emails, social media posts we accumulate? That's a whole other beast.
It really is. And it's something that so many of us struggle with. It's that constant urge to document every single moment, even if it's just a trip to the grocery store.
And then there's that guilt we feel when we even think about deleting those digital memories, right?
Yeah, like we're betraying the past if we let go of any of it.
But what if we approach digital memory clutter with the same mindset that we're applying to physical clutter?
Okay, I like that.
Do these digital files actually spark joy? Do they add value to our lives? Or are they just taking up space, weighing us down?
Such a good question. And I think it's one we all need to ask ourselves more often.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy to fall into that trap of digital hoarding. But just like with our physical possessions, we need to be mindful about what we choose to keep.
Okay, I'm ready to do a digital declutter. But how do we even begin to tackle something like that?
Well, I think the first step is just becoming aware of it. How much digital clutter do we actually have? Where's it all stored? And how is it affecting us? Once we have a better sense of the problem, we can start to make a plan for dealing with it.
So it's like taking inventory before we start decluttering. And then we can start to figure out which digital items are meaningful and which ones we can let go of.
Exactly. And just like with physical decluttering, we need to be gentle with ourselves. There's no need to rush.
As we're talking, I'm realizing that a lot of the same principles apply to all types of clutter, physical, mental, digital. It's about being mindful, being intentional, and creating a system that works for us.
Absolutely. It's about finding that balance between cherishing our memories and living a life that's not burdened by them, no matter where they're stored.
I'm really loving this deep dive into memory clutter. It's making me think differently about so many aspects of my life, how I organize my home, how I manage my thoughts, even my digital footprint.
It really is a journey, and it's constantly evolving.
I'm feeling energized and ready for part 3. Let's wrap up these amazing insights and bring it all home for our listeners.
Sounds great. Let's do it.
Welcome back to your deep dive. We've explored, every corner of memory clutter, physical, mental, digital, all of it. But I'm curious, as we wrap up here, what does this all mean for you? What are your biggest takeaways? What's really sticking with you from all this?
This deep dive, it's really made me think about, well, how I relate to my memories. I've realized how often I hold on to things just because I'm scared of losing those memories.
Yeah, I get that. It's like we think if we let go of the object, the memory will disappear too.
Right, and we've been talking about how the minimalists, they remind us that memories, they're within us, not in our stuff. And that holding on too tightly to the past, well, it can stop us from really living in the present.
It's true. So how do we loosen our grip but not feel like we're losing those memories? Like how do we honor the past without letting it take over?
It is a balance, isn't it? Part of it, I think, is finding different ways to connect with those memories, ways that don't involve, all the clutter. We talked about journaling and voice recordings, but there's so much more we can do.
Right.
Like making photo albums or scrapbooks, writing stories or poems, or even just sharing those memories with people, telling stories.
Yeah, I love that. Sharing memories with others, that's a great way to keep them alive. And it doesn't take up any physical space at all.
Exactly. And when we do that, share those memories, we might even find they become more meaningful as we weave them into our shared experiences with others.
This is making me realize that I tend to think of memories as like these fixed points in time. But maybe they're more fluid than that. Like maybe each time we remember something, we're actually changing it a bit, adding new meaning as we go.
I think that's a great point. Our memories, they're not static, are they? They're constantly evolving right along with us. And every time we think about a memory, we're seeing it through, our current lens, our current perspective.
I know, right? This deep dive has also really opened my eyes to thought clutter, how our minds can get so full of the past. It's like our brains are trying to make sense of everything all at once.
It's a lot to process, isn't it? It's like we have all these books in our mental library, and we get lost in the stacks sometimes.
So how do we deal with that thought clutter? How do we find space to just be?
Mindfulness keeps coming up, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's about being able to notice our thoughts, without judging them. And when we realize we're dwelling on the past, we can gently shift our focus back to the present.
Right, like training our minds to be more like a calm river instead of a wild ocean, just letting those thoughts float by.
Exactly. And when we find that quiet space inside, we might be surprised at how clear those important memories become, the ones that bring us joy and connection.
I'm also thinking back to what the minimalists said about those alternative ways to capture memories, like journaling and voice recordings.
Yeah.
It's about honoring those experiences without all the extra stuff,
It's about finding what works for you, being creative.
Right.
Maybe write a song or paint a picture.
I love that. It's like creating our own personal memory museum, choosing which exhibits to put on display.
Exactly. And sharing them with the world in a way that feels right for us.
This deep dive has been so insightful. It's really challenged me to think about the memories I hold on to and how I can honor them without all the clutter.
I agree. The key takeaway for me is that it's not about erasing our memories or trying to forget. It's about finding a way to, hold those memories in a way that helps us live better today.
I love that. This has been an amazing exploration of how memories and possessions, they're all intertwined, and how all of that affects our ability to, really be present.
It has been fascinating, hasn't it? And as we wrap up, one last thought. If memories don't actually live in things, where do they exist? How can we create a space inside ourselves that allows those memories to thrive without needing all those triggers?
Until next time, happy diving.